You are listening to Down Home. Time. It's a prism of endless possibility, where a single decision can fracture, reshaping the world as we know it. Welcome to a realm of alternate histories, bold, imagined, and rooted in real, what could have been moments. For all the MCU fans out there, this is our take on What If? The show which explores alternate realities, asking how events might have unfolded differently if key moments or decisions had been made. Today at the Down Home Podcast, we ask, what if the promise had been kept? What if, after emancipation, Black Americans truly received 40 acres and a mule? What if Black Loyalists who fought for freedom in exchange for loyalty were actually granted the 100 acres they were promised? How would land ownership, economic freedom have transformed generations? What would our present look like if those reparations had been real? Follow us and ponder the question, what if? I'm Derek Wise, and on behalf of Jay Jones, welcome to Down Home, the Canadian experience by two black men.
Breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, simple breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, simple breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new.
Yeah, so this one's for all the Marvel fans out there, man. What if? What if?
Yeah, what if? Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What are some of the things you noticed?
Well, it's an interesting question, you know. I came at it from two angles. So what if the American government held fast to its 40 acres and a mule? That's the first part. And then from our perspective, the Canadian perspective, what if the British government held fast to its promise of, I found it. It's so what they promised was number one, freedom. So they came through on that one.
Yeah.
The second one was 100 acres of land for each head of household, and an additional 50 acres for each family member that went with them.
Yeah.
So those two things. What if they, and so yeah, it was freedom, land, and work is what they promised. The Brits promised. But yeah, to break down the American one though, that's huge. It's massive because we're talking about. I think I saw something like 40,000 freed slaves that was promised to. What did you find?
I found that they were going to offer land along the Atlantic coast in South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, 400,000 acres, which I guess would have allotted the 40 acres to approximately 18,000 slaves in that part. And they didn't keep the promise, obviously.
No.
They
but yeah, think about it though. So what happened? Okay, first of all, what happened to those slaves? There was a portion of them that became sharecroppers, which basically literally means that they were working the land for someone else.
Yeah.
There was a portion that migrated, and there was a portion that just couldn't get on their feet, man. Like, you know, what if all of those freed slaves down the states were given land and were able to work it? So that's the beginning of generational wealth.
Yeah, it totally is. Yeah. But they, in the aftermath of slavery, they were just denied the opportunities. Like blacks were denied opportunities. It didn't really matter. And that is, yeah, just like you say, that was the start of it. And with that crux in their so-called, way that they were going to give away land, it put blacks at a disadvantage already, and it went up through the ages. Like even in the 2000, I'm jumping ahead, far ahead, but even in the 2008 housing crisis in America, blacks were steered towards higher loans,
Yeah.
which increased higher disclosure rates. And it's just all the systemic things that I noticed. Like these laws they put laws in place so blacks would be at a disadvantage. Like they didn't even, it was almost illegal for blacks to own land
Yeah,
a lot of the time. So that in itself, you're up against laws.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Honestly, I think that still would have been in place.
Yeah.
But there would have been more sure footing for these individuals to start from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's totally hypothetical, but just think, instead of being, at that point they would have been landowners.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whatever they did with their land, that was a beginning point for wealth.
Yeah.
So there wouldn't have been a huge migration north, right?
Mhm.
So you would have had, in theory, like this is just in theory, right? So there would have been still a huge concentration of black populace in the southern states,
Right. Yeah.
right? So you wouldn't have had the mass population north. So you wouldn't have a huge black population in New York, Michigan, Detroit area,
Mm-hmm.
or even LA,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It would have been a huge concentration in the south.
Yeah. And maybe not even in Canada either. Like they might not have migrated as far north, but in the northern, the northern hemisphere, it was you were pretty much free for the most part. You know what I mean?
Yeah. With land comes freedom, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So those individuals that were escaping the South and saying, fucking, I'm going to go straight to Canada. That wouldn't have happened, right? Because, but of course, our ancestors would have been there in Canada anyway,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
But so the first big thing in the what if, the population disbursement of black people would have been very different,
Mm-hmm.
very different. And as far as like there's the wealth gap, like you're saying, the laws and whatnot, that's what's created the modern wealth gap between white and black people, are a lot of the, like redlining and all these different laws. That probably still would have happened, to be honest, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it wouldn't be so wide, because you're dealing with a populace of black people that own land and can work the land or sell parts of their land. So there's wealth there. You know what I mean? Let's start with a real story. In 1865, as the Civil War came to a close, Union General William T. Sherman issued Special Field Order No. 15. It promised freed black families 40 acres of land confiscated from Confederate plantations along the southeastern coast. Shortly after, the U.S. Army even began distributing Mule surplus equipment from the war to help with farming. It was a radical act of restitution, and for a moment, just a moment, it looked like a new black economy might rise from the ruins of slavery. But after President Lincoln's assassination, Andrew Johnson, his successor, reversed the order. Land was taken back and returned to former enslavers. The promise of 40 acres and a mule, gone. Just like that. But what if it wasn't? What if that land wasn't snatched away? Imagine this. Over 4 million newly freed black people, not just technically free, but equipped with land to grow, land to pass down, land to build homes, schools, churches, and businesses, land that would become equity. That's not just freedom, it's a foundation. Generational wealth would have started then, not in scraps, but with soil and space. Families would have owned farms, towns, and controlled their labor. Instead of sharecropping under the thumb of former enslavers, they'd be entrepreneurs, landowners, and political power players. The ripple effect? Huge. Black Wall Streets wouldn't be isolated phenomena. They'd be everywhere. Economic hubs across the South built by black hands, owned by black families. Inheritance would replace starting from scratch. Banks would be black owned. Schools would be better funded. In the American South, it wouldn't just be a site of struggle. it might have been the heart of black prosperity. Instead of fighting for a seat at the table, we might have built our own. We'd be talking about a different United States today. One where racial wealth gaps weren't gapping. One where land wasn't stolen, where prosperity wasn't punished, and where justice started with action, not just words. But that's not what happened. Still, in this episode of Down Home, we imagine, what if? And that brings to the flip side of that, like this land that was being promised was actually taken from southern rebels.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So where the black people in that area would be gaining land and wealth, there would have been wealth and land taken away from the white populace.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like you're bringing a bit of equality there.
Yeah.
Right. So some of these white southern landowners, these slave owners, were actually stripped of wealth initially.
Yeah.
Because they lost the war, right?
Yeah.
But
and also the number is quite staggering how many blacks there were, which they dubbed the Negro problem. It was 7.5 million.
Yeah.
So
in total.
Yeah.
But the amount that were promised the 40 acres and the mule was actually 40,000 freed slaves. So that's a very valid point. That would have created in the black populace the haves and have-nots. Because there would have been a large portion of the black populace that did not get the 40 acres and the mule as well, right? So but instead you just have straight across the board, no one got anything.
Yeah, and some of these things sort of were, taken away after time, like in I think it was the 14th and 15th Amendments, where blacks were able to vote and they were actually able to own land, but the damage was already done. You know what I mean?
Well, that's actually another point, man.
Yeah.
The right to vote was attached to land ownership back then, right?
Yeah.
So would have that 40 another reason why that wasn't given, but would the 40 acres and mule all of a sudden make those black landowners given them the ability to vote? Would it?
Yeah.
We don't know because it didn't happen, right?
Yeah, because they still weren't considered citizens either.
No, they weren't.
So. And
another reason why they weren't given the land. But like shifting the focus to Canada. So the Black Loyalists were promised freedom, land, and work, but there were white loyalists that were promised the same thing. So the difference being the Black Loyalists were basically put to the back of the line when it came to the Brits, right? So the Brits actually did come through for the large part for the white loyalists, giving them 100 acres of land for each head of a household.
Right.
So that happened for a large majority. Some of them didn't get it. Most black people didn't get it either, right?
Yeah.
But some white loyalists did not actually get it either. The ones that decide with the Brits and fight against the Americans.
Yeah. In Canada, there were some settlements there were quite a few settlements that were established. But over time, they got taken away.
Let's shift north. The year is 1775. The American Revolution is raging, and the British, desperate for manpower, offer a bold deal. Freedom for any enslaved person who escapes rebel territory and joins the British side. Thousands take that chance. They become Black Loyalists, fighting for the crown, risking everything for the hope of life beyond bondage. When the war ends, many of them are evacuated to British territories, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Quebec. The promise? Freedom and land, up to 100 acres per family, just like their white loyalist counterparts. But the reality? Most Black Loyalists got nothing, or very little. Some were given rocky, unfarmable plots. Others waited years for even that. In Birchtown, Nova Scotia, once the largest free black settlement outside of Africa, Families lived in poverty on the margins of white towns. Winter was brutal, employment was scarce, and the land that they were promised mostly went to white settlers. But what if that promise had been kept? What if every Black Loyalist family received 100 acres of fertile, buildable land, promptly, fairly, and without strings? Imagine what places like Birchtown could have been. Not a forgotten footnote, but a thriving cultural and economic center, a beacon of Black resilience, self-sufficiency, schools, churches, and farms passed down through generations. And not just Birchtown, think of Shelburne, Halifax, Windsor, parts of southern Ontario transformed into interconnected networks of prosperous Black communities. Toronto today might have had a Black suburb with deep roots, a Canadian version of Tulsa's Black Wall Street. Generational wealth would mean businesses, savings, investments, entire sectors of the economy, agriculture, construction, trade, could have been Black-led from the beginning of Canadians' development. But instead of prosperity, the Black Loyalists were pushed into labor, into indentured servitude, into second-class citizenship in a land they helped build and defend. This wasn't just a missed opportunity, it was a betrayal. Still, we ask, what if freedom came with a foundation?
I just thought it was interesting that, like, even in Canada, the same thing happened basically.
Oh,
You're promised, but people were, there was more freedom here.
There's more freedom, but the other thing with the British government, instead of just saying a blanket no, there were some Black people that were put on the land, but they weren't given the land. Like we know that happened in Preston. It's almost like here you go, but it's not really yours.
Yeah. And
so,
and the sad part about it is they usually gave the crappy land in Canada and America. You know what I mean? It was usually like Mississippi became a huge settlement, but that was like they were down by the river and they had to learn how to adapt within the elements and stuff like that. So they weren't always given the best.
No, so I was just gonna say, so again, let's ask what if they came through on that promise? What if all the Black Loyalists that were promised 100 acres and 50 additional acres for each family member?
Yeah.
What if there was enough land in Canada?
Yeah, there was enough land everywhere, even in America and Canada. They were basically giving it away to most people, But, so what if they were able to get that? So you have some generational wealth that leads to people sort of probably being able to educate themselves. So you wouldn't have what you see happening in the world today. You know what I mean?
I honestly think there would still be, because there were existing laws that created the wealth gap beyond that. So there still would be a wealth gap. It wouldn't be as wide. So what comes with generational wealth? So you have greater what they call social mobility. Like you said, you have the ability, access to, in the States, you'd have access to healthcare, education. In Canada, we have access to that anyway, right? And you can see that with the way that I believe Black people in Canada have more social mobility than they do in the States because of that.
Yeah, very much so.
You also have the thing is though, there's that saying of we're only as strong as our weakest members. And when it comes to team play, we're only as strong as our weakest team member. So what is these keeping these promises and reducing the loss of generational wealth? What does that mean? It means a stronger country. It means a stronger economy, because you have families that have purchasing power and the ability to generate wealth, right? Through this ownership that they would have had, passing down generation to generation. So that's what, in my opinion, that's what would have happened both in Canada and the United States. You have a stronger, healthier economy. You have a stronger, healthier populace, probably reduced crime rates as well. Just opportunity, resources just spread a little bit more evenly around, right?
Yeah,
Because of this ability, this transfer of wealth over generations.
Yeah, because it's hard to start at zero, but people with the generational wealth, like some white families,
Yeah.
they're already way ahead of the game before, before the blacks. And it's mainly like what I notice a lot of course, people of color, but I think in the America and Canada, blacks suffered the most, and blacks are often the most that have suffered from this more so than anyone else. I'm not taking anything away from people who have migrated here from different places and everything like that, but we were displaced first in that sense.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, definitely.
in North America anyway.
Yeah. Well, you see these shows like we were talking about on the weekend. Was it 1883 or whatever?
Yeah,
That prequel. A show about people coming over to America. Like that was a group of German settlers at that time. They're
hmm
striking out for free land. Like
yeah,
this opportunity that a lot of the black people that were brought over via via slavery did not have that opportunity to do.
no.
So
And
yeah,
then with the native indigenous population, the land was just taken from them. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
exactly.
They didn't have, you know, they just got put on reservations, and
Hmm. Yeah,
there's all kinds of things. But I thought it was pretty crazy. But the one thing that we've always talked about, and the one thing that we always seen, and the one thing that always gets my goat is how, like, even before doing this podcast, I was aware of these things, but now I see how ensconced in law and these things that they made actually happen. And it's such a sad way to be because of the damage that has been done over the years. And there'd be less racial trauma, there'd be less trauma, you know what I mean, for families to go through, and more sort of knowledge of self and more empowerment. Those are the things that I've seen just because of the struggle itself.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what if?
What if?
Breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, simple breaking new ground, breaking new ground.
You have been listening to Down Home. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Breaking new ground, simple breaking new ground, breaking new ground, breaking new ground, yeah. On a high plateau, from the one down below to the future of the funk, getting lost in the flow. Contact with the spark magex. Now it's time to flex with the force from the soul, reaching all aspects, getting deep, no time to sleep. As you reach your next phase, laying it all on the line. New trail start to blaze. It's a fire inside, a brand new path, breaking down the sum to one. Feeling free, I just laugh with the joy.
The song Breaking New Ground from The Breakdown.
Like magic prescribed, only to see the perfect blend, like a diamond in the rough, ready to drop a perfect gem. It's time to shine so fine to see what you find.